Alright, so we got a whole lot going on. Today's going to be an awesome day. I hope you guys are all kind of ready to hit this with the ground running. We got a whole lot going on. So, expect about maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour to 2 hours worth of content here. I'm going to try not to make it 2 hours, but we got a whole lot to cover, and this should be loads of fun. So to let you guys know, my tests so far have said that I've got about a minute, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 seconds to a minute and a half worth of lag between my stream live to what I get feedback from in all of my other content. So we're going to take a look at as much as I can. I'll be keeping an eye on Discord and on the live chat in YouTube to try to respond as I can, but it would be best, if possible, if you can hold your questions until we get closer to the end of things. Otherwise, let's kind of get started. So the whole reason for having everybody get together today and for doing this stream is because we want to talk about V2. This has been something that's been on everybody's mind. There's been a whole lot going on. There's been a lot of talk about it in the servers, and there's just tons and tons and tons of stuff that need to be talked about and need to be covered as far as this is concerned. So we're going to get a lot of the clouds out of the way today and cover as much as humanly possible about all of the things that you're probably going to want to know over the course of the next couple of weeks as we come up to the V2 release time frame. That is something we will talk about later in the video as far as the time frames that we're looking at releasing. I'll let you know now. They are close, though. We are coming close to releasing V2. So, important information. We've had about 50,000 players that have connected to PrimeGames servers since January 29th of this year. That is a huge number of players, and it blew every expectation that I ever had out of my mind. I have no idea where in the world those people are coming from, but we definitely appreciate having that many players, and we definitely appreciate all the feedback that those people have been able to give us over time. So that number is one of the reasons why V2 is so important and why we're going to be talking about it. So those 50,000 players and all of the ones that had connected previous to that, we are addressing all of the feedback that have come from as many of those players as we've been able to talk to. And a lot of the things that we're doing are strictly intended to cover and deal with some of the things that are causing the most headache and most disruption for the majority of our players. So if you've got some questions about some of these things, I want you to keep in mind as we're going that one of the biggest reasons that we're doing most of what we're doing is because we have talked to players. We've looked to see what's going on. We've wanted to see what was happening with those players, the things they liked and the things they didn't like. So that means that V2 is going to change a lot of things. There's going to be a huge difference. Some of it at the front of things are going to be kind of obvious and straightforward. They're going to look similar, but there's going to be a lot of things underneath that are very different as far as how we work. And then in addition to that, there's also going to be a lot of things on the surface that are going to change as well. So some of the most immediate changes that I want to go ahead and talk about that affect all of our game servers. And this is stuff that's going to come across no matter what games we implement or what servers it is that we decide to add later on down the road or whatever. First thing that's important is that PvP is changing in all servers. As far as Skyblock is concerned, or prisons, particularly with survival to some extent, and it should be already obvious with creative, but for the most part we are going to stop promoting PvP in servers that don't have a PvP goal. And I know that that's going to be a huge mind boggle for a lot of you, because the majority of the players that are currently connecting and playing on PrimeGames, that's what you do on every game mode. I'll cover why it is that we're going to make those changes, but here's what's happening. Okay, so in Skyblock, in prisons, and in survival, and in creative, if you have other players that are looking to buy enchanted gear and they want to find some kind of a way to fight with other players where they can prove that they've worked their way up and they've got the best of the best gear, and that they on top of having all of that really awesome gear are able to just beat people down with it, well, those people need to go to factions. That's what our faction server is going to be targeted to handle. It's going to be strictly built with the intent of players fighting one another. So if you get players that are joining on Skyblock or that are joining on Prisons and they're looking to be able to get enchanted gear and armor and weapons and stuff that are going to be able to help them in combat, those people need to go to factions. If you have people that are just looking to prove themselves in general, they don't care whether it's with armor or without armor or whatever, then they need to take a look at Kit PvP. So with Kit PvP, we're making a handful of changes there that are going to be slightly different, but for the most part, if you're strictly looking to duel or if you just immediately want to jump into fighting, that is definitely Kit PvP. So there are a number of reasons why we're going through this change. All right, the biggest thing is that a lot of the feedback that we have gotten over the last several months has said that we are getting a lot of players that come, play on the servers, and leave after their first couple of days because they feel like there's nothing worth doing on the servers. They don't want to fight. They came to hang out so that they could talk with their friends and chill, but the majority of all of our servers, the only exception really being the creative server, are all targeted to try to get players to fight with one another. So they don't feel like there's a good reason for them to be on the server, so they leave. And the other portion of that is that a lot of these people are coming in, they're seeing game names and game modes like Skyblock or Prisons, where they're expecting some very specific things, and a lot of those things aren't actually showing up. So by removing the PvP element, or specifically what we're doing is we're not promoting PvP. Let me make that really clear. It's not that we're entirely removing it, but we're definitely going to be not promoting. We're going to be removing custom enchants from those servers that enhance combat. We're not going to make it easy or possible in some cases for players to get weapons that are of really high grade quality to make it, to where they can do a lot of damage very quickly. Those kind of things. It's going to be really hard for players to PvP on those servers. So if they want a PvP, they need to go to factions or they need to go to Kit PvP, depending on what their preferred style is. So there are loads of reasons for that. So we'll get into that a little bit more as we go through each of the game mode servers. And as we talk about that, I want you to keep that in mind. No, Ahmed, I see that the fighting is bad concept. It's not that it's bad. It's just that we have a lot of players that don't want to fight. They're not looking to fight. We've got a lot of people that are coming onto the servers who are looking for just somewhere to hang out, and instead they're being pushed and provoked and promoted to get enough money to buy a bunch of gear to go fight in PvP. And a lot of players don't want to do that. So we're tailoring to try to accept as many players as humanly possible. Alright, so the second major thing that's going to be happening with V2 is a performance increase. We are doing a huge amount of work under the scenes and removing all of the complication and the problems and the bugs and the issues that you guys have been dealing with. We're getting rid of all of those things that are causing so many problems, and we are significantly rewriting all of the core underneath everything that's happening to try to make it possible for all players to have a really solid, clean experience, and to make it possible to have more players on each independent server. So instead of being limited at somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 or 60 players, and then you start to see a lot of lag, we're trying to get to the point of having about 250 players per server instance. We feel like that our players will have a lot more fun if we get up to having about 200-ish number of people on the server without having a lot of lag. And then getting to a point where maybe later on in the future we're looking at trying to expand beyond V2 into V3, where we would be able to have upwards of 700 people to 1,000 per instance. So it would be the ideal situation if we could get to that point. We're trying. We're definitely looking to get that way. So once we've handled most of the performance items and we've taken care of the PvP problems, because those are two of the biggest complications that players are currently dealing with. The third issue that we're trying to target, the primary significant thing that we're trying to get taken care of, is reduction of staff responsibilities. I know at first this is going to sound kind of bad, but I'm going to show you how this is really good. The problem that we've got right now is that staff members currently can't really play. It's very hard for players to be able to be a staff member and a player at the same time. Currently, the tools that staff member has don't make it really easy for them to do their job, and a lot of the things that they're being expected to do, there's no real solid guidelines for them to follow that help them to enforce the same rules everywhere. So, on the follow-in to V2, we're going to reduce a lot of the expectations on the staff as a whole. A lot of that's going to play into things like modifying or changing the lobbies, or whether or not you're allowed to add slappers or other NPCs and statues, whether or not you're allowed to update signs in lobbies or in other static maps, ones that were created specifically for PrimeGames. Those kind of things are going to be removed from what we're expecting you to do. Instead, that stuff is either going to fall back on the developers, or it's going to be left to the builders to handle those things. What we want the majority of our administration staff to do, and what I mean by administration staff is helpers, moderators, admins, senior admins. Okay, if you're performing one of those 4 roles on the server, then what we're expecting you to do is simply to moderate the players. That's it. You don't have to do anything more. We want you to pay attention to chat. We want you to make sure that people aren't doing anything illegal, and we want to make sure that players aren't doing anything that could potentially harm PrimeGames as a whole or its community. Alright, and that doesn't require you to do anything much more than just making a few reports, making sure that those reports get filed properly, and then making sure to follow up on issues or problems and report things that you're seeing in the server that are problematic to the right people. So if you see something isn't working correctly, you should definitely be sending that information back to one of the developers, or through one of the other avenues we're going to have available for you to make a report about having a problem or an issue. Additionally, a lot of the things that you're going to report or need to handle in the server have also been automated, so that you don't have to think about what's going on. I'm not going to be able to demonstrate a lot of that today, but I'm going to give you a little taste of what that looks like, just a smidge, as we kind of get moving and going along. So when you go to make a report on players, whenever you go to deal with issues that players are having, you'll be able to make a report as a staff member from directly inside the game. And once you make that report, then the server will handle, in most cases, taking care of whatever specific problem is being addressed or has been reported, by either kicking the player from the server for you or banning the player from the server. So I'll cover a little bit more of that kind of as we go. But for the most part, keep those things in mind. So first major update that everybody really needs to be aware of is no cactus. Absolutely no cactus. We're not going to care about cactus. Cactus is worthless in V2. Absolutely, completely, 100% worthless. We won't buy it. We won't sell it. We'll give it away in some cases. But we're not going to promote it. If you try to build a giant AFK cactus farm because you think you're going to make tons of money, I've got news for you. It's worthless. So, don't bother. Alright? That's kind of that's one of the biggest problems that we've got right now that causes performance issues, is that it's ridiculous. You know, the number of AFK cactus farms is ridiculous. And the amount of damage that they do to the servers is just horrible. So, we won't be selling cactus at all. We won't be buying cactus. You might be able to get your hands on some here and there. But if you go make an AFK cactus farm, I promise you, you are going to have chest loads worth of absolutely useless cactus. So, I see all of you responding to the picture. It gets the point across, doesn't it? Oh, anyway, so we're not going to be buying cactus. That's important. As long as you guys keep that in mind as we're going, we're good. All right, so with creative, let's step into the creative server. Let's talk about it. It's one of our lowest population servers at the moment, and some of the things about how we're changing it, I expect will be significant overall. I'll answer more about the PvP questions because I'm seeing these come through a little bit more here and there. I'll answer more about PvP on independent servers as I get to those servers. But for the most part, just remember, PvP, for the most part, we are not going to encourage it. I'm not necessarily going to stop it in a lot of places, but we're definitely not going to give you weapons. We're not going to give you tools that are enchanted with combat-related enchants. You're not going to have custom enchants that increase your damage or add additional protection or give you some kind of benefit or help over other players on other servers other than factions or kit PvP. If you're not on one of those two servers, you're not going to get custom enchants or enhancements or bonuses or potions or anything that are going to help you directly with your combat skills. Alright, if you want that stuff, join factions or join kit PvP. One or the other. Alright, so on creative, again, this is one of our lowest population servers. We don't have a whole lot going on there, and a lot of that is because there's just nothing going on. It's really kind of boring. You know, a lot of people do have fun getting in there and building some really amazing things. And don't get me wrong, we have some amazing builders that are on our server that are doing some awesome work in the creative server. But there's nothing really to help drive people to be there or do things on that server. So, step 1 in version 2 is that the creative server will have an economy. You will not be able to claim an unlimited number of plots. You will actually have to buy your plots. The way that plots are going to work for purchasing and the way the economy is going to work for handling all of that as far as the creative server is concerned is strictly related on a couple of very specific details. One, you're going to get login bonuses for every day that you log in. Depending on how many days that you log in consecutively will determine how big of a login bonus that you get. Then, for every 10 minutes that you spend on the economy server, you're going to be getting an additional small payout. Essentially like getting a small paycheck every 10 minutes. So, your first time joining, you're going to get a bonus that's going to allow you to buy your first plot. You'll also get your first login bonuses as far as regular money is concerned. And then you'll immediately start earning money during that time frame. So, the other ways that you're going to be looking at potentially making money. Your plots are going to be worth money based on what you build. You'll be able to sell these plots for money, depending on the various different things that are going on. You can set the prices for the plots that you're selling, and then you allow for other players to kind of maybe potentially bid or talk with you or negotiate about the plots you are trying to sell. When a player buys a plot from you, they get to keep everything that's on the plot the way that you've built it. So this would mean that some of our really creative people out there could build houses for others and make money that way. Or some of you could do some of the other fantastic work that you've done with like statues or pixel art, things of that nature. And that would also be something that you could then sell on the plot to other people if you wanted. So while you're doing these things, your plot is going to have the opportunity to get upvoted. As players come by and see what it is that you're doing, they'll have a chance to upvote your plot. And every time that you get an upvote on your plot, you're going to have an opportunity to make a little bit of money off of each one of those upvotes. Every player is going to have a maximum of 3 upvotes per day, and a player will only be able to upvote a plot once. If you upvote a plot, or if you try to upvote a plot more than once, it won't work. There are a couple of circumstances about how that will change or work overall, but just keep in mind that you're going to make money off of plot upvotes. The top 3 plots on the server that have the highest number of upvotes are going to be featured in the lobby. There will be an NPC for each of those 3 plots where players will be able to go hit that NPC, and it'll take them to the plot so that people can see why that plot has made it into the top 3. Making it into the top 3 plots will definitely be useful or helpful overall. And this reminds me of something that we should have talked about just before getting started on creative. But there are opportunities, not just in creative, but in all servers, for things that are called challenges. This is something that we're introducing because it's going to play a particular role in not just the the independent servers themselves, but there's an overall goal that we're going to implement with these challenges. There are some things that are going to come into play overall. So challenges are essentially quests to an extent where you're going to be required to collect certain numbers of items, or maybe find certain items in the game, talk to certain people, maybe log in during certain time frames, or perform other functions. By completing those things, you'll complete the challenges that go with it. There's going to be some kind of bonus or reward that will go with that. And an example of that would be getting your plot featured. If you get your plot in the top 3 featured list, that would be one of the challenges that you would be able to complete on Creative. One of the other really significant features that we've had a lot of people request on the Creative server is the ability to merge plots. So, one of the things that's really significant overall is that we're going to implement this in V2. We know that plots are going to be able to be merged as long as those plots were initially side by side, touching. So, if you purchase a plot and the plot next to you is empty and you purchase that plot as well, once you've gained a little bit of money additional, you can purchase an option that merges those 2 plots together and allows you to build on the walkway in between those plots. And at the moment, we don't have any limit for the number of plots that you'll be able to connect together to be able to do those things. The other thing that has been highly asked for is adding in world builder type tools onto Creative, so that players, while they're working on their independent plots, have tools that are significantly useful. So those are something that we're considering. We haven't planned on releasing that in V2 yet, but we know that it's being highly requested, and we'll see what we can do. Alright, so that for the most part kind of covers Creative. Remember, you're going to have an economy that's primarily driven based off of your logins and buying and selling plots, as well as upvotes. There won't be any buy and sell on the actual blocks in the system. Every player will still have access to Creative mode just exactly the same way as they do currently. The differences are going to be that your economy is going to drive your ability to own plots. Alright, so into survival. Let's talk about survival for a little bit. This is another game mode that's currently suffering significantly, and this is one of those ones where PvP is being discouraged. And we're doing this for a number of reasons. One of the potential problems that we currently have. No, moderators will not have the ability to build or break on other people's plots. That's one of the many things that I have highly talked about. I know that some of the reason for that is because you're afraid that players are going to build things that may be inappropriate. And I know that that has happened and that we need to be able to respond to that. There are going to be other options for dealing with that particular problem. I will mention again, though, that I would like, if possible, for you to hold most of your questions till the end, because there is almost like a full minute and a half worth of difference between the entire stream versus whether or not you're hearing my response. So, like right now, I just saw a question come from Ahmed at 10:52 about inappropriate items, but I've already answered it. So it would be really helpful if, for the most part, you kind of hold your questions until we're completely done. And the answer to that is no, we're not going to remove the plot. We are going to clean the plot. We will return the plot back to a normal state. You'll be able to report it the same way that you're able to report other things. The server will then respond to that particular issue and handle the problem for you. Alright, so back to the concept of survival. So one of the biggest problems that we currently have with survival is that players join the lobby, they're trying to get started, they spawn out in the wild in the exact same location as everybody else, and tons of people can be waiting for them to show up, and they've not had a chance to build up any kind of economy for themselves, buy any enchantments, or have any gear, and then they get spawn killed. It has recently been a big problem and occasionally shows up every so often. So the way that we're going to handle this is that we're going to maintain the ability for players to claim land. the same way that they're currently doing, but every player is going to start with a wild token. So whenever they join the server for the first time, they get a wild token that will teleport them to a random location somewhere in the wild. This is going to be a very, very broad, large area where they could potentially be teleported into, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30,000 blocks by 30,000 blocks. They'll have a random teleport chance anywhere inside of those 30,000 by 30,000 blocks. It's a fairly huge area. The only time that a player will use a wild token and not get teleported to a random location is if they request with their wild token to be teleported to somebody else's location. If they get teleported to somebody else's location, they still use up their wild token, which means that they won't be able to teleport to another location from that. So it's something that will be really important for them to keep in mind. If they use that wild token to teleport to another player, one, it's going to require the other player that they're teleporting to accept that first, and then they will lose their wild token to teleport to that player. Some things that are going to hopefully help out in the process overall, though, is that we are going to have custom terrain. So you're going to have really interesting worlds to explore. It's not going to be nearly as crazy as the really boring random terrain that's currently being generated by our servers. We're generating some custom terrain that looks significantly better. So you're going to have mine shafts to look at. You're going to have ravines and caves and mountains and plateaus and all kinds of fun things that are significantly better than what our current worlds are generating. All right, with that, however, is going to come some limited size on the initial world. We'll try to continuously expand that over time as we see a need for it, but to start with, we're going to stay within a particularly limited size, and we'll go from there and see how it goes. Hopefully what this will do in the end is that it's going to reduce the amount of problem that we see with players that are spawn killing, because it's going to be almost impossible for you to tell where a player is going to show up at. But then in addition to that, it's going to give actual survival concepts in place. Some of the questions that have already been asked in other meetings where I've talked about this are mobs, and this is something that I have said repeatedly. We're not going to have mobs for quite some time. It's more likely that we'll get mobs than it is that we'll get redstone, but at the moment when we release V2, I don't expect mobs to show up very soon after that point. It's still going to be quite some time because there are some problems with how mobs work and how much lag that they introduce to the server. So we'll be talking more about mobs as we get closer to a point of having them ready, and we will definitely be announcing any kind of additions, changes, or features that we're adding into the servers as we start moving beyond the release date. So that means that you won't be expecting spawners to start out with or spawn eggs. There's probably not going to be any mobs, but we'll definitely have some in-game shop items or ways for you to find food otherwise. All right. Let's move on to prisons. This is currently our most popular server, and I know that I've already seen loads and loads and loads of the whole, but wait a minute, fighting, it's so important, and this is kind of where, this is one of those places where I can really make it obvious that fighting isn't important. So the concept of a prison server, if any of you have ever actually played on Minecraft Java, or if any of you have taken some time to branch out and play on any other servers, you'll have seen that the prison servers don't work quite the same way on Java as they do with PrimeGames currently. There are a lot of lacking and missing features. There are a lot of things that just don't make sense about how our server works when you consider that it's supposed to be a prison where you have inmates and guards and things of that nature. So we're going to completely reconcept the entire prison server as a whole, starting with the idea that you are an inmate and inmates don't have weapons. That's how it is. You don't like it, go to factions. The few weapons that you might be able to get your hands on are probably going to be best for you just to hold on to for other things, but you're not going to really be doing a whole lot of fighting with them. So Prison ranks are still going to stay with the A to Z ranking process. However, we're removing all of the excess ranks that are over the top of that. So like currently we have coal and iron and gold and emerald and immortal and all of these ridiculous crazy ranks that we've never had anyone in almost the entire 2 years that PrimeGames has been around actually complete the process of ranking up all the way through these ranks. The only people who have ever really got to any significant rank level have done so usually by purchasing a rank from the store to help get them up to that point. So with that, we are changing the system so that there's only one rank up A through Z, and then what we call a prestige. When you get to Z for the first time and you rank up past Z, you'll go to a free rank. That free rank actually has some benefits. There are some things that are going to happen when you hit free that are going to allow you as a player to do some different things on the server that you wouldn't have been able to do. Once you hit the free rank, you'll have an opportunity to prestige your ranks and go back through the ranks again, A to Z. By prestiging through the ranks, you'll earn an additional bonus for each rank that you prestige through. You'll have to prestige through all of them to get back to being to a free rank. And the requirements for ranking from A to Z as a prestige rank will be different for the prestige ranks versus the original ranks. I will talk about ranks and how that transfers at the end once we get kind of done with all of the independent game modes, because I know that is a concern. So the free rank, I want to kind of harp on this a little bit, and then I'll go back more to the actual rank up process, because these two things are fundamentally different overall for how V2 is going to work in comparison to how the current servers are working. So the free rank, I did mention there is a significant reason for being free. All right, and I'll point out a little bit more of this once we kind of finish talking about the last game modes. But the things to understand are that we're offering some benefits to players that currently don't exist. There's no reason on the current prison server to hit a free rank. All right, and then the concept of ranking up from A to Z is currently all strictly based on money, and that is the other significant process that's going to change. In version 2, it won't just be buying your way through the ranks. You're going to have to complete challenges, which I had mentioned earlier. We're going to call it on the prison server community service, but it's the same thing as far as we're concerned. It's a challenge, and each challenge for each rank will be different to some extent, or will be different enough that you're going to have to redo things slightly differently all the way through. So an example would be that as you finish ranking up or trying to gain all of the money that you need for rank A, that you may have to go plant some crops for the prison kitchen. And in the process of planting those crops, you'll earn the reward necessary for ranking up to rank A, or from rank A to rank B. So with those things being significantly different, players are going to need to focus on working their way from A to Z by not only completing the independent parts of the money-making process, but also by completing the challenges, because the challenges are going to continuously get harder and harder the further up the ranks that you go. You'll find that you may have to complete multiple challenges in a lot of cases to actually be able to rank up, where you'll have to have multiple challenges either to get the item that you need, or you're going to have items from multiple challenges to be able to rank up. Yes, prison kitchen. Not that, just a general concept, not that you're actually going to have a prison, but, or not that you're going to have an actual kitchen on the prison, but consider the idea that you are in prison and somebody's got to cook food for inmates. You know, again, this is supposed to be role play. You're thinking about things like a prisoner would be. It's not exactly like we can get you to wash laundry. So those are some of the things for sure that are going to come into play. This is one of the areas where custom enchants is going to get interesting. We're definitely going to have custom enchants at some point, but they're not going to be released with V2 at first. we have to get some of those things polished and balanced out, and we're more worried about making sure that performance is good before we have custom enchants, and then custom enchants will come on later down the road. So with some of those same concepts, let's take a look at Skyblock. So the Skyblock server as a whole is one of the places where PvP absolutely made zero sense. While I could sort of somewhat understand in the prison server that you might have inmates fight on occasion, what you wouldn't have inmates do is get up in full, battle armor, running around with fully automatic weapons and shooting one another or blowing each other up with grenades and rocket launchers. That wouldn't happen in a normal prison circumstance, which means there's no reason that players should be running around with OP gear, even if they are kind of hitting each other with their fist or maybe with their pickaxe. Okay? So, in the Skyblock server, there's zero reason in a Skyblock server for PvP. Skyblock server is supposed to be about working on your island. An island that has limited functionality and features, but you're supposed to prove your knowledge and understanding of Minecraft mechanics and your ability to work around those limitations by completing special challenges. This is one of the places where the addition of challenges on the server is really going to kind of show through. You're going to experience it probably the most on Skyblock in comparison to most other servers, because you're going to have the most challenges available to complete in most cases through the Skyblock server. So with the Skyblock server, the way that this is going to work, when you join in, you're going to have an opportunity to actually to create an island similar to what it is that you've already been working with and dealing with, but islands are going to be completely different. As a matter of fact, this is where we get to kind of demo things just a little bit. So I'm going to start my Skyblock server back up, and we're going to take a look at some of these features real quick. And at this moment, we're going to reveal the server theme. For those of you that were not aware or have forgotten over time, V2 is going to Greek mythology. This is a demo of the Skyblock lobby, somewhat unfinished. But we've had a lot of work go into this. But this is generally what you're going to expect. The same type of theme is going to be used all the way across all the servers. Alright, you can go ahead and get kind of an idea of some of what's going on. Notice that the NPCs are slightly different. They're using specialized costumes. They're a little bit bigger overall. We have custom crates. We're going to have costumes. We're also going to be implementing other cosmetics. Another thing to take note of is this wonderful little item in the hotbar. Slot number 9 currently is going to be used particularly for an item that's going to allow you access to all of your game mode features and functions, and everything that you would normally do with a command is going to be available through your hotbar item, which at the moment is currently a totem. So when you use this totem, you're going to have your options for whatever you would normally do. Here we're going to go ahead and create an island. Something to look forward to, you're going to be able to choose different types of island generators and starting islands to work with. Alright, so we've created our first island. We use the totem again. Notice that the options have changed here. I'm going to take a moment real quick before I hop on the island to show you one more thing. Really difficult to read, but in chat I am listed as mortal. That is the guest rank at the moment. And if you notice, the options that I've got here are strictly to what you would expect a normal player to have. So we're implementing a server settings menu that also allows players to change some things about how they interact with the server, particularly whether or not they're viewing scoreboards, what language they would prefer to have, and as we have a few other additional features that are allowed on the server, we'll add some of those things here. This is also where your staff mode functions are going to come into play. I'm going to demonstrate that really quick. I'm going to back out of the server. update my rank. When I join in at this point and type into chat, you should see that I now have admin privileges. Notice admin by my name instead of guest. While to begin with, it looks like my regular options from the hotbar item are the same. There is now an enable staff mode option available for me as a staff member in my server settings. By enabling this option, it changes what options are available on my totem. I now only have staff mode options. This is where you will do all of your staff reporting, all of your staff actions, most of the things that you've got going on that you're going to need as far as a staff member are going to be available through this menu. And you will lose access to your regular gameplay menu as well, so that there's no way for you to be able to cheat or be accused of cheating. Once you're finished with whatever it is that you need to do, you're going to go back to your settings menu and disable staff mode, which will take you back to having regular menus and regular options. So let's go check out the island. For those of you that have not seen the legacy generator on the current Skyblock, this is kind of what it looks like. This island is actually available on the current V1 servers if a player uses the /is command properly. So at the top, notice that the boss bar is showing that the island level is currently 0 and that it has 990 points out of 1,000 required to reach the next level. So we're going to roll through just a couple of the basic things that you would expect to do. We need a cobble generator, which is going to be really important as we're going along. And because of how important the cobble generator is, this is one of the things that we've taken a lot of feedback on over time. Some basic items in the starter chest, the very kind of things that you would expect to some extent. Notice how limited the items are. This is intentional. Those of you that don't know how to make a cobble generator, there we go. I'd like to point out, notice that the blocks are not automatically coming to me. And if you heard whenever this block showed up as coal instead of as a cobblestone, you got the little Enderman teleport sound. That should help you on the server know that things have changed. So the question about rebuilding the generator in the case that somebody does something incorrect, we're going to make that possible. Players are going to be able to get an additional lava source if they need one. There's going to be a time limit on how often that's allowed. This particular function, notice I'm going to go through the cobble generator a bit, but if you notice as I'm breaking the blocks for the cobblestone particularly, the island level is reaching closer to being complete. I'm now at 996 instead of 990. didn't say double generator, I said cobble generator. And there are some people that are here that may not know. Alright. Island has leveled up. We're currently at level 1. And we've got to work our way up to 4,000. We've got a good bit of work to do. We're not quite going to make it there from here with just strictly on the cobble generator. Some things that happened behind the scenes that that weren't quite so obvious, because I'm not going to spend all day sitting here popping through the cobble gen. But notice that we haven't gotten anything other than coal or cobblestone. That's all that showed up in the cobblestone generator as a whole. The reason that the blocks aren't going straight into inventory is because that's going to be a featured item or a feature that's strictly for paid ranks. If you have a paid rank, items will automatically go into your inventory. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm going to change the level of the island so that you can see the difference in the cobble generator, because I don't have time to work up all the way from 1 up to 20. That's something that honestly should take a couple of months. And there are some of the features that we're expecting for you to use to get to that point that aren't currently implemented in the version that I'm demonstrating. Particularly the challenges have not been implemented yet, so I'm not going to be able to show you those today, but we'll talk about them a little bit more here in just a minute. Alright, so when I join back onto the island this time, what you should notice is that instead of being at level 1, oh, I'm missing a level apparently. Alright, so what we should notice is the island level is no longer at level 1. It should be at like level 19. Yep, we're at level 19 with 36,000 out of 40,000 points necessary to reach that. And we're going to go through the cobble generator a little bit more this time. This is where things are going to get interesting, because I haven't had enough time to work my way up. But one of the biggest problems that players had was this right here. Alright, if you get an ore that shows up that you can't break with the pickaxe that you have, especially very early in the stages, this was a concern that a lot of players had about having this type of cobble generator where you're able to see the ores as they're being generated. We've solved this by limiting what ores are able to show up in the island level. By the time that you start seeing ores that you cannot break with a wooden pickaxe, you should be able to break, or you should have made stone pickaxes. By the time that you get to a point where you have something that that needs to be able to break with an iron pickaxe, you should have had enough iron to have made pickaxes by that point. Notice that there are lots of different blocks showing up. Instead of just, like that's gravel, we have cobblestone, coal. We had a bone block a minute ago, that's clay. Emerald ore will also show up, diamond, lapis, and a special block that I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll have to figure that out. Adding in clay for the for the islands is going to make it possible for you to use dyes and build on your islands with terracotta. Add a little bit of color, which you wouldn't have been able to get before without having to buy those directly from the shop. Just a lot of things going on. So some examples of challenges that you'll have to complete would be that you would have to smelt a certain number of items. So removing a total number of maybe 50 iron ingots from a furnace while you were on an island would increase the island level. Completing a conversion of clay balls or clay blocks into terracotta, hardened terracotta, would potentially have some opportunity for you to build your island levels that way. Lots of things that are going on. One of the things that I haven't had a chance to show you yet, let's see if I can do this, is that island sizes are limited. Notice the message at the bottom telling me that I have to level up or purchase a higher rank to go further. So, as the island level goes up, you're going to have an opportunity to build out a little further. The fact that I'm able to show you that limit that close on level 19 is a problem, but we'll get around to fixing that a little later. Particularly, as you level up, every couple of levels you'll get an extension on your island that'll let you build out further until eventually you'll be able to get out to your bonus island. And the items that are going to be on the bonus island will be significantly more important. Oh, somebody's asked a good question. I don't know how I missed this to begin with. So, totem. Notice it will not go in the chest. I also cannot drop it or move it in my inventory in any way. Any attempts to modify that item, to move it or change it, will result in the item being put back in the location where it's supposed to be. Island height is not limited, but strictly just the width and depth of the island on your X and your Z axis. For those of you that are asking and maybe didn't get a good clean shot at it, that island out there is currently a sand island with a single cactus on it. It will not be the same whenever we release V2. So those are the majority of the features that are going to be implemented on Skyblock. There are some of the ones that are really significant, such as challenges that I haven't had a chance to demonstrate yet. But for the most part, you've had a chance to see some of the really good things that are going to be happening. I'm going to head back to well, I guess we could take a look at this particular option real quick. This is one of the things that some people have a hard time doing to begin with. You can change the spawn location for your island through your options menu if you're the owner for the island, or someone with a rank, like an island officer that has permission to do those things. Regular members wouldn't have that ability. You can also invite people, or you can go back to the hub. There's going to be a few other options to go with that. Crate keys. You no longer have to have the crate key in your hand to be able to use a crate key. They'll no longer take up crazy spots in your inventory. You won't have to have chests and chests and chests all over the place for crates, or for crate keys to be able to use them. They're stored automatically, and your crate keys are universal. So any crate keys that you purchase from the store can be used on any server. If you purchase 5 crate keys, those crate keys get added to your global inventory, and you can then use those 5 crate keys on any server you want. So, for instance, the 55 legendary keys that it shows I have here, if I were to transfer over to the prison server, I would be able to use those 55 keys on the prison server instead if I wanted to. If I used any of those keys on the prison server and then came back to the Skyblock server, this number would be reduced by how many ever I used on the prison server. Items get automatically added to your inventory, no craziness, and notice that the item quantities get dropped immediately. You are able to see that update happen. So I think that for the most part covers it. At the moment, I don't think that I have a way to show you. Well, I guess I could. We can take a look at trails. They're kind of premature. I have to change my rank to be able to use them. Yeah, I know. Epic potatoes and epic carrots, right? The thing is, you don't know what they do yet. Maybe they are the most epic things that you can get your hands on. Alright, so when I log back in here, what you'll see is that I've removed the admin rank, and I'm back down to just being a regular guest. Back to being immortal, just plain old Jane stuff. But what I have done is I've added a purchased package for costumes. Helps if I use the right NPC, I guess. And here I have a new costume available. There we go. Ta-da! All right. So at the moment, these little puffs that are coming up are ones that are strictly just for testing. But we'll have other similar cosmetics that are like this, where you have like spiraled hearts flying around you, potentially some wings, maybe some trails that change the blocks behind you as you walk temporarily, that kind of thing. But again, some of these cosmetics are going to be purchasable from the store. Some of them are going to be available from the from the ranks themselves, where you purchase a rank and those ranks will come with some bonus cosmetics that you can only get by having a rank. There will be a few other ones that we give away as part of events and some other items. Alrighty, so for the most part, I think we've pretty much covered as much of the in-game material as I can show you for the moment. For those of you that have not played on the Kit PvP server, about an hour after we get done with this meeting, the Kit PvP server will be updated with leaderboard abilities and some of the other enhancements that we've made recently that that haven't been added in quite a while. So you'll have a chance to hop on and check those out. You won't have access to any of the staff mode features or anything yet, but we'll get to that point. Twisted, I'm really trying to hold on to any questions that need to be answered until the end of the thing. I've seen that you've sent me a couple messages asking me to check the dev Discord. Alright, so I think that we've pretty much covered Skyblock. That leaves us with, I think, Kit PvP and factions. So I'm kind of hoping that most of you have already had a chance to play on the Kit PvP server. If you haven't, like I said, in about an hour The Kit PvP server is going to be updated with some of the more recent features that we've added, the ones that we know that are working and that are in good shape, especially the ones that we're intending to have ready for release. We're going to try to have all of those features ready for you to be able to test this weekend and kind of get a feel for how those things are going to look. In addition, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Kit PvP particularly. Mostly what is important to know is that we have made significant changes there that are enhancing performance overall, that are making it possible for players to choose out of 4 different kits instead of 1 kit that is available. Kits have a timer on them that allow you to renew them about every 5 minutes, and we are tracking statistics more than just how many times that you've killed other players or what your current kill streak is. The other thing that's going to be important in the update that you should see whenever we push everything is that leaderboards will have been added to the lobby that allow you to view some of those statistics. So the statistics in the Kit PvP process are going to be important for challenges, because that's one of those places where challenges will come in. You'll have a chance to earn challenge rewards for having the highest kill streak, having made your way onto some of the leaderboards, or for things like exceeding certain numbers of kills or kill streaks altogether. Let's see, we've got some questions about prisons where there's some issues going on there. I'll talk about that just a little bit more here in a minute. Alright, so with Kit PvP, some of the other things that we know that are going to be coming down the road that currently aren't available, and things that we don't expect to have whenever we release the server, are going to be things like one-on-one dueling, where you can either enter a queue and wait for somebody else to join, or where you can challenge someone else to duel with you, and a potential for 2v2, where you have teams of 2 against 2 fighting in an arena. Those are probably going to be mostly where you queue up against other teams, but there will be a party system in place or some way for you to team up with another player so that you can enter into the 2v2 system as a whole. So let's talk about factions, and this is probably going to be the one that takes the majority of the rest of the time. There's a whole lot that has to go into this. The majority of the players that we currently have on the server all have some kind of a group in every server, whether it's Skyblock, whether it's prisons, whether it's survival, or what. All of those players have a group in each of those servers. So with that being the case, we are going to implement factions server-wide. There's no more need for you to have to recreate your group on every independent server. Your faction will go with you everywhere that you go. So in the way that factions is going to work and implement with the server, and because we're redirecting players to the faction server to do all of their fighting and for trying to get their enchanted items and all of their combat gear and those kind of things, all of the challenges that you complete on the other servers are going to have an impact on your reputation in your faction. And the higher that your faction reputation is as a player, the better your faction strength is going to be. These things are crucial overall to how the faction server is going to work. So things that you do on Skyblock will affect your faction strength. Things that you do on prisons will affect your faction strength. Things that you do on creative or on Kit PvP or on survival, all of those things are going to affect your faction strength. And so the more that you do in lots of other places, so the more that you participate in creative, the more that you participate in Skyblock, the more you participate in prisons, the more you participate in Kit, the more you participate on survival, all of those things, the more important it's going to be for your faction, and the better that your faction is going to be overall as you do those things. The reason that this is significantly important is because the best way for a faction to gain significant faction strength to be able to raid other bases is to have diverse players. So your factions are going to be able to Your factions are going to be able to talk across servers. So if you're in a faction and you want to talk with your other faction members, you'll be able to talk with your faction members no matter what server they're in. So you could be in Skyblock and some of your faction members in prisons and the rest of your factions members in the faction server, but all of you will be able to talk in the same factions chat. Additionally, you'll be able to do some basic level factions interactions on each server, depending on what it is that your faction's rank allows you to do. Particularly, you'll be able to invite new members in most cases, but significant moderation commands like being able to disband your faction, setting a home for your faction, modifying player ranks, those kind of things, all of that will have to be done on the actual faction server itself. But you'll still have access to some basic statistics like what your current faction strength is, how many members that you have, how many are online. You'll have access to your faction chat, and all of that stuff will be viewable on every server instead of having to strictly be on factions. In the factions world altogether, that's going to be a generated world as well and restricted in about the same size that the regular survival world is. We're going ahead and kind of putting out there that whenever we release V2, we're expecting to have to reset the server every so often for factions. So the reset on the faction server will probably happen once every year. We'll adjust this or determine we'll modify this based on what we get as far as feedback from players. The thing that we're looking for most significantly is that in the new servers, mines will not be available in any server other than prisons. So the PvP and non-PvP mines that are currently in survival and that are currently in factions that are primarily used to drive your economy, those are going to be gone. They're being replaced with the better worlds overall for the generated worlds so that you have better resource availability, but at the same time you're going to have to fight for those resources, especially from faction to faction. If you're going to want increased amounts of gold, or if you're going to want increased amounts of iron or diamonds to be able to put better gear together, or if you're going to need more resources for making potions, those kind of things, you're going to have to fight against the other factions to get some of those things. You're also going to have to compete in some events to help keep your resources established and make sure that you have the things that you need to continue competing as a good faction. Otherwise, the only other ways are going to be for your faction to find ways to buy those things, and in some cases that may be that you're buying those resources from the shop. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we kind of come around to understanding some of the other details. So in the faction server, we're heavily pushing that players are in a faction, and that factions are supposed to have a home base that they build up and that they try to protect, and they keep their resources in, and they work together as a team to make sure that those resources are used properly, and then that team goes out and raids other bases to try to get to a point where they have better resources, better material, and have a better reputation or have a better status among them versus other factions that exist. Some of the things that we're looking at trying to make possible as far as how the faction server is going to work, we're going to try to make it possible for brewing stands to work. We're going to see if we can get some form of enchanting working, even if it doesn't necessarily work through anvils or through enchanting tables. We'll try to make some other options available. Most of your combat related custom enchants are going to be available strictly on the faction server and won't be available anywhere else. And then we're also going to host challenges on a regular basis or events specifically for factions groups on the faction server or through the faction server. So what this means is that occasionally on weekends or sometimes through the week, a special event will show up that maybe will repeat during the course of the day. that your faction will have an opportunity to compete in against other factions. At the end of that event, whoever wins the event with whatever particular goal is in place for that event will gain some kind of additional faction reward that will either be given to the leaders of the faction to then be able to be handed out to other players, or will be given in the way of or form of like a key. In some cases, the participating factions members will gain some bonus items to be used in their factions group. Some examples of some of the events that we're looking at trying to add where factions would be able to compete would be King of the Hill events or Battle Royale events. Where in a Battle Royale, multiple factions would be able to join at one time, and then players in each faction would be wearing colored armor that would help you to be able to tell which faction you were in as you were fighting against other factions, or maybe some other additional bonus of something that helps you to see your faction versus other factions. Competing in those events and winning those events, like I said, they're going to get some special bonuses and additional items for each faction that are going to be helpful overall. Especially things like crate keys. With the faction server, you're going to have the opportunity to get faction crates or open faction crates with faction crate keys. And some of the things that you're really going to need to kind of help your faction progress are going to be found in the factions crate. Sorry, going through my checklist trying to make sure that I've covered everything that was important we're aware of. I think for the most part that I've covered all of the things that I intended to cover. I'm going to take a scroll through chat real quick and see if there are any questions that I haven't answered that were things that needed to be addressed. The question about Duo and Cure being on the V2 servers, yes, he is allowed. He has been providing me feedback about quality on the servers and is another developer that has helped me do some testing. He's not currently part of the dev team, but someone who has been helping me on the side with other things. I'm not sure. Somebody asked a question about what if you have a different friend group on different server and the two groups don't get on. I don't quite understand that question well enough to provide an answer. Can someone clear that up? That's not going to be a possibility. 2 different factions on 2 different servers. Not going to be a thing. It's not the same. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't talk with your friends, and that's one of the features I haven't been able to demonstrate, and that I'm not 100% that we're going to have at release on V2. But you should have the ability to have friends on the servers, as well as blocking and muting other people. The blocking and muting is definitely one of those things that is important. I'll talk about that as far as administration is concerned. So one of the things that you're not going to be able to do is you're not going to be able to directly mute somebody who you think is being toxic. This applies to almost every action that you currently would do by issuing a ban command, a kick command, anything of that nature, at all. So all of those things you're going to have to go through a particular report. All right, the report is going to handle. The report's going to handle telling player or ensuring the fact that a player receives appropriate action based on whatever they've done wrong. Part of that is that we're not going to mute players directly. If players are being toxic, if they're having some kind of an issue as far as the things that they're saying, we have made it possible for other players to be able to mute players that they don't want to listen to. And they have the ability to do that temporarily or permanently through the options that they're going to be given. So whenever they mute that player, they'll no longer hear that player in chat in any server, not just on the server where they were muted or where the player decided they didn't want to listen to it anymore. But anytime that player shows up on any server, if they've been blocked by another player, the player who blocked them won't be able to hear them in chat. Twisted, I'm assuming your question about why not on the why can't you have multiple groups of friends? We're talking about factions. Factions aren't necessarily a group of friends. They're a group of people who have agreed to work together towards a common goal. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have other or additional friends on the other servers, but your faction has a particular goal that you're working towards. Right now, your friend groups, quote unquote, on the other servers don't have any purpose in most cases. You're not really using the factions features, excuse me, or the gang's potentials in most of those cases where you're working towards any goals as a team to complete or do anything. And this is a game server. So with what we're doing in the version 2 update, if you are in a group, that group is going to be a faction, and that faction particularly has a goal. And that goal spans and reaches across the entire server in every game mode. All right, so everything that you do in Skyblock, or everything that you do in prisons, or everything that you do, everything that you do in those systems or those circumstances are directly going to play a role in how your faction is able to compete and work on the faction server, as far as being able to raid other bases or whether or not they're able to compete in certain types of events. So as far as the DTR system is concerned, so this is a death ratio to raid, all right? And that's not going to be implemented on our system particularly because we have instead faction strength. All right, so a faction's strength overall is going to determine the protection for their home or their area. So if you've got lots of players online that are part of your faction, or even lots of players that aren't online that have been, contributing overall. I'm getting to it, Zans. That's part of what I'm talking about. So if you've got loads of players overall that have been helping to contribute, it doesn't make sense strictly for kills to be what determines whether or not you become raidable. All right. So if you've got, I don't know, maybe 50 members in your faction, and those members are highly active compared to someone who has, 20 members that aren't very active, you wouldn't want that 20-member faction who's not very active to just be able to walk into your base and and raid your stuff just because you had a few kills from another group who was actually doing their job as far as a faction is concerned. Yes, that's the idea. The best factions can raid anyone, but you're going to be very hard-pressed to find everyone, and it's going to be set and done in certain ways that you can build your faction strength up by not being on the faction server. That's one of the things that's so crucial to how this system works. So, Twisted, I have yet to hear any reason to justify why it should be chunk-based. I haven't heard anything that tells me why a 16 by 16 block is required for a claim area. Nothing. You've said this repeatedly in discussions with the development team, but you've never given me a reason why. So when I get someone who can explain to me why claims should be strictly only 16 by 16 areas, and it has to be something better than, well, because we have a pack that we run that shows us where chunks are. That's not good enough. That is not a good enough reason. I need something that tells me why we should limit ourselves to a 16 by 16 area, or by grouping by 16 by 16 areas. So at the moment, the way that those claims are going to work, all right, whenever whenever a factions member creates a new faction, all right, you get somebody who joins the faction server for the first time. They have no faction alliance, nothing, and they create a faction. They're going to get a warp token, just the same as you get a warp token on survival, that allows you to randomly teleport to somewhere in the wild that gives you an opportunity to place or claim your starting base. All right, there is a need. There is a need for that particular. There's a need for that particular location to be far enough away from other factions that you're going to be able to claim and expand. All right, that's one of the things that we've considered. So when you make your initial claim, you're going to get a basic starting area as far as like how much space that you're allowed. We haven't decided exactly what that's going to be yet, but probably something in the neighborhood of like 30 by 30 blocks. With no height limit. One of the things that we have decided is that factions will not have a height limit on their claim. So that when they claim an area, it will strictly be an X to Z ratio, and everything from 0 on Y all the way up to build height is in that faction's claim. That way you don't have factions that are digging underneath you or are stealing the resources that happen to be in your claimed area. So spawners. We don't have spawners. We're not planning on spawners anytime in the very near future. What you're talking about, that's regular factions gameplay. Part of factions is trust. You got to learn who to trust, who not to trust. You got to pay attention to people. It's all about how you handle those things, and that is what a faction server is intended to do. You're going to have some people that lie to you. You're going to have some people that trick you. You're going to have some people that try to use you to get information so that they can raid your base. Those kind of things. You're going to have to deal with those things. So the /F map, the factions map, trying to find or see other. Yeah, staff will be able to play just like anybody else. The thing is that when a staff enters staff mode, they're not able to set homes. They're not able to interact with inventory. They're not able to break blocks. They can look in inventory to see if somebody has something that they shouldn't have. They'll be able to make reports about things that are happening. They'll be able to go into a vanish mode and teleport to players so that they can watch players to make sure they're not doing something they shouldn't be. But they won't be able to set homes. They won't be able to take items from players. They won't be able to give themselves anything that stays. Their inventory will get cleared whenever they first enter staff mode, and then whenever they leave staff mode, they will be teleported out of the location that they are currently in, back to spawn, and their original inventory, whatever they had in their inventory whenever they went into staff mode, that inventory will be returned back to them, and any inventory that they managed to get while they were in staff mode will be cleared again. So the only things that they'll ever have are the items that they earn through normal methods in the regular game mode. No cheating. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned earlier, particularly, is that we're reducing the weight of responsibility on the staffs overall. So every level of staff are going to have that same restriction put in place, especially the ones that are allowed to moderate on the servers. So I mean, I definitely understand Mageman about the idea of having a basic set, that you can work with. The thing is that number can be anything, and while chunks have some relation to the game, there are reasons. I can definitely see reasons why someone would not want to claim in chunk-sized groupings. All right, so if someone can give me a solid reason, spawners, I definitely understand why that would potentially be a thing, but the other problem that we've got is that none of the Pocket Edition servers, none of the Pocket Edition server softwares that allow for plugins or custom modifications like what we're doing are allowed to do, or none of them have a spawning system for entities or for mobs that make it possible for you to follow the normal Minecraft physics. Zan's Alpha, probably not. That stuff ends up getting just tossed. And it doesn't necessarily make the claiming process a lot easier. It all depends on how it's interacted with and what your concepts are for how that process works. If step one is that you place a block at the place that you're going to consider to be the middle of your base, and then the space around that is a predetermined size that we tell you what that size is and we're able to show you on the factions map, that's all that matters. No matter what that actual size is, whether it's 16 blocks, whether it's 32 blocks, whether it's 125, or whatever, that we say that you go out from that point, those things don't matter. What matters is that that you know what that number is and that you can keep up with it. FMAP is chunk based because faction servers work on vanilla software on Minecraft Java. And if you're talking about trying to re-implement some of that, you're starting to get into some of the more internal core of how the specifics need to work. Think about it from a player's perspective, and we'll go from there. That's a good question. Where are you planning on using Ender Pearls at? That would be a question that I would ask just to kind of get started. But the answer to how you're going to get Ender Pearls is going to be through factions chests by getting crates, faction crate keys, and there's a couple of other ways that'll show up. That's an internal discussion item, Twisted. We'll talk about that in dev chat. Because the thing is that we may not even have FMAP. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what players decide that they want to do with it. Yeah, I could see where Ender Pearls would be useful trying to run away from people. Probably not, Zans. As far as the starter kits are concerned, um, we're probably not going to do anything in the way of modifying or changing some of those processes. Starter kits aren't going to be necessary anymore. There is no war zone as far as what everybody currently thinks of as a war zone. So your war zone in factions is going to be the wilderness area where you build your bases. You're going to have to find other players. You're going to have to find other bases, and that's where you're going to fight on factions. You're going to need time to build up your resources, so you don't want people showing up on you. I don't know about the auction house. That it's possible to some extent, but there are some significant problems that come into place in trying to implement an auction house, particularly finding a way to do it where players actually have a way to look at all of the items that are available in the auction house without having a lot of problems from lag. We're definitely going to implement a player plating system or a player trading system where players can initiate trade with other players, and then the server handles transferring items from one player to the other instead of you having to throw it on the ground or put it in a chest for the other player to pick up and then wait for the other player to give you money or whatever other item. Spawners and mobs in any server at the moment are a no. They're not a hard no. We're not saying we're never going to put them there, but they are significantly complicated for us to add at the moment. If we do add mobs, they would have no AI at all. They wouldn't move. They would just stand still whenever they spawned in. You would find them and kill them as they're standing there. They wouldn't fight back. So the question about elevators, particularly if you're talking about using like soul sand to create like a water elevator where a player puts a couple signs up to keep water from flowing out, and then the player walks into the water and the soul sand pushes them up a chute. I don't know if that's going to be possible because I don't know if Pocket Mine actually allows for that. I guess I could test it real quick and see, but I don't know if those physics actually work or not. Well, I seem to be having issues getting a clean world going. Sign warps are a whole different ball game. That's not nearly the same as what I'm trying to look at the moment. So a sign warp, I don't know. That's something that we haven't even thought about, haven't talked about, nothing. So we could definitely consider that or look into it, but it's not something that I was aware of as far as something that people had asked about. The other thing too is that anything that comes from a hardcore faction server usually requires a lot of the vanilla basic Minecraft features to work, like a good world generator, being able to produce mine shafts and having mine carts and things of that nature. The ability to spawn mobs in place, all of those kind of things. So if you don't have those things, then trying to actually use that stuff I'm sorry, so trying to use some of those things, particularly anvils, enchanting tables, brewing stands, the ability to travel to the nether and to the end, those kind of things are really significant overall in a hardcore faction server. And if you don't have all of those features working, then you can't really do hardcore factions. It's not quite the same. So soul sand mechanics don't work. If the soul sand mechanics don't work, I'm almost 100% sure that the magma block mechanic won't work either. This is one of the big limitations for some of the server software that we're using, is that a lot of the vanilla features that you would expect to have are simply not there. And this comes from the fact that Mojang never provided the initial starting software that we needed to be able to do these things, to be able to use the vanilla features and just directly modify them. So yeah, magma block doesn't work either. Because if I had done that in a vanilla server, that would have worked completely different. I don't know, Twisted. We can compare it directly to another. So let's test the theory. That's one of the things too that's kind of critical. Notice the bubbles, and that I didn't have to actually put water on all locations. So yeah, it definitely doesn't work on the vanilla server stuff. I'm almost certain that if we do the opposite, that did not seem to work. Oh, the magma block's got to be at the bottom, doesn't it? And you guys were just sitting there laughing at me. There There we go. Yep. Yeah, the stream should be updating at this point. Okay. Notice the lack of bubbles. So, yep, it's not working in the same server software. This is Pocket Mine, by the way, and so it does not work in Pocket Mine. So as far as faction elevators are concerned, no, you're not going to be able to build them using soul sand and magma blocks. And whether or not we implement sign type warps where you're able to use those to kind of get you around, I don't know. We'll talk about it internally. I'll request some information from players, and as the faction server gets released and we have a chance to kind of test a few things here and there, then we'll see whether or not that's something that needs to be added or implemented. If it does, we'll see about putting it in. All right, any other questions? We've had a lot of coverage so far on a lot of things. I'm surprised that nobody else has asked the question that I figured for sure that somebody would have asked. All right. I hope that I've answered the majority of the questions that are important, at least the ones that are. Yes, pickaxes in prisons are going to be enchanted. It will be an OP style prison where players will be able to. We're looking at an option that I haven't decided on implementing yet, where your pickaxe may be a permanent pickaxe, one that you keep the whole time, or maybe one that you can level up. I don't know. We're discussing that. But they will definitely have some form of enchantments available on them so that you can work through the mines much easier. Twisted, you have direct access to the Kit PvP code. And I'm fairly certain I've already told you where all of those type of things are handled in the code. So go take a read. I bet you'll find the answer you're looking for. the enchants that you're accustomed to, as far as by their names and even some of the things that they do on the current server, none of those custom enchants will be seen on the new server. So we might have one or two, maybe, that make their way back for a reprise in version 2, but they definitely won't be there at the beginning, and they definitely won't be something that happens very quickly after the initial release. We are more concerned about making sure that bugs and problems get polished out first, and then we'll go from there. All right, so last answer to the big question that I'm sure that everybody has had on their mind and absolutely nobody has asked. When are we releasing V2? The answer to that question is that we are planning a beta release on May 7th. The way that this is going to work is that we plan on having it available to staff members first, so that they'll have a chance sometime in the weeks before that to get on and test and see some of these game modes for themselves, and to start providing some of the details that we need as far as feedback on things that need to be fixed. But for the moment, that is the target. We are trying to release on May 7th. So that beta release we expect will be a lot of work that's going to have to do. There's going to be a limited number of features that will be available at that time frame, and then we will continue to release additional features little by little over the course of the next month or two that follows that. And then the rest of the features that we were expecting to have in place, once we have those out, then we'll start implementing additional features that the community may have fed back to us during testing or in the process of us getting past the release point. I cannot show versions of the Prison V2 server at the moment. They are not in a state where I can actually demonstrate them or play them. So once we get to that point, I promise we'll get some things out there where you guys can see it. So if you guys have no more questions, I'm going to call it quits because we're coming up on 2 hours. This is a fairly long video for anybody that's got to watch following up. If you do have additional questions, or if there are other things that you need to know, send me questions in the staff chat or in direct message, and I will do my best to answer as much as I can. All right, guys, it's been fun. Thanks.